Good morning, everyone. Someone once said that perfectionism is a disease, or perfectionism is a form of self-abuse, or expecting perfection from someone else is abusing someone else. Why? Because we live in an imperfect world. So how do you expect perfection? Now, the positive way to look at it is that I always like to say, when my daughter once asked me a riddle, she said, "What's the biggest room in the world?" And her answer was, the room for improvement. So instead of trying to be perfect, say, God gave us a gift. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. No matter how good you are, there's always room for improvement. The next two Torah portions that we start reading today, this week, Vayakhel, next week, Pekudei, is almost a complete repeat of the Torah portions of Teruma and Tetzaveh. Teruma and Tetzaveh dealt with the instructions to build a tabernacle at great length, hundreds of verses with great detail. The next two Torah portions is a complete repeat of how the Jewish people actually went and fulfilled all of the commandments and actually built a tabernacle. Now, anyone who's a student of Torah knows that the rabbis analyze not just every verse, not just every word, but every extra letter in the Torah. There's nothing superfluous in the Torah. Yet here the Torah spends hundreds of verses in the next 2 weeks Torah reading, telling us, and they built the ark, and they built the candelabra, and they did this, and they did that, and the measurements, all over again. You know, if you're a public speaker, rule number one is don't repeat yourself. When you start repeating yourself, you lose people, right? Why do we have to spend 2 weeks repeating all of the Mishkan tabernacle instructions and how they fulfill this and they fulfill that? It could have just said one verse, and the Jewish people did everything God told them to do, and you would have saved yourself a couple of hundred verses. Why all of this? And the answer is very instructive about our lives. You know, we all have an ideal vision of how life is going to be. You have a vision how your marriage is going to be. You have a vision how your family is going to look, how your children are going to grow up, how successful you're going to be in your business, right? But then the reality doesn't always match your ideal vision that you had. And how do you cope with the gap between what your vision and your idealism was and how the reality shaped up? How do you cope with that gulf? And that's what the message of these parshiot are. Teruma and Tetzaveh was this beautiful vision. God says, you're going to build a dwelling place for me. I'm going to dwell in your midst, and my presence will be amongst you. But right after Teruma and Tetzaveh, you have Kisisa, the golden calf. That's where the tablets are shattered. All the lofty dreams of God being amongst the Jewish people suddenly disintegrate right before the eyes of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people fall into spiritual abyss. And the question is, how do you recreate your dreams after they've been shattered, after they've been destroyed? And so comes Vayakhel Pekudei, post-golden calf, and says, now comes the challenge of life. Your dreams didn't work out the way they were meant to be. You could either fall into despair, you could fall into depression and give up, or you could recreate your dreams again to the best of your ability. And that's what Vayakhel Pekudei is, the rebuilding of the dreams that were shattered. And sometimes, and here's the punchline, the rebuilding of the dream that wasn't according to the original plan is greater than the original plan. Because the original plan was just a dream. It wasn't reality. But the building of the reality came through the struggle, came through the toil, came through the challenges and the hardships that you had to face. And God says, I cherish that creation even more than the lofty dream. Because the lofty dream was in your mind. But when your marriage hit a challenge, or your relationship with your kids hit a challenge, or whatever you envisioned didn't work out the way you dreamed it to be, how did you cope with it? How did you rebuild? And God says, that's more precious to me because it came through the hardship and the struggles. And that's why we read the whole Torah portions over again to say, look what the Jews did. After the golden calf, they still went and obeyed all of God's instructions and built it as close as they could to God's original plan. And that's the message for all of our lives. There's no person who their reality matches their dreams. There's always going to be changes. But the question is, can you deal with the challenges and rebuild and build despite them? And God says, that's more precious to me than anything else. I heard a story that happened this Friday in a supermarket in Brooklyn. You know, when I grew up in Borough Park, and apparently stores still do this, they actually have credit. Not credit card, but credits. Because a lot of times parents, like my mother would say, Moshe, run to the store and get a bottle of milk. She didn't want to give me money, so the storekeeper had a book, good old fashioned. You would write down, Scheiner family, bottle of milk, $2, you know. And every once in a while my father would come in and pay the bill, whatever it was. They would give you lines of credit. So this woman was in the store before Shabbos. I heard this firsthand. I won't say the name we heard it from, but this happened this Friday. A woman was in a Brooklyn supermarket shopping for a family with a full cart of groceries for Shabbos. And she comes to the counter and she takes out her credit card and she tries paying, and the shopkeeper says, your card was declined. The woman's a little embarrassed. She's online. People are before Shabbos, you know. She tries another card, declined. Third card, declined. She says, I guess I'll just leave it here. I'll put everything back. Really embarrassed. The guy behind her says, no worries. He takes out his card. He swipes his card, pays for the whole bill. The woman can't thank him enough. She quickly takes her bags and heads out of the store. Stranger. The guy who was behind this guy says, when he came to the counter, the guy says to the storekeeper, does this family have a bill, a credit? He said, yeah, they have an account. He says, how much is it? He takes it out. He says, it was about $2,000. He says, take my card again. I want you to clear the bill. Paid the bill and walked out of the store. Sometimes things don't go the way you want it to be planned to go, but sometimes something more beautiful can come out of those challenges of life. And that's why God put us in an imperfect world. Sometimes we think we want perfection, but really what we want is the world God gave us, where there's always room for growth, there's always room for improvement, there's always room to help another person and receive help from another person.